I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement interview with expert series. I'm Dori Mintzer, host of the series and owner of Revolutionize Retirement. I am delighted to have you here today. For those of you who are new, we meet on the fourth Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern Time. And sign up can be any time now that we're meeting on Zoom. So you can actually go to my website and you can see who the upcoming speakers are, and you can sign up at any point. Everybody who has signed up will get a recording link within a few days after the call, as will Michael, our guest, or whoever the guest is each month. And now that we're caught up on all the prior podcasts and interviews, you will find that probably within a few weeks, this interview will be on a podcast, so anybody and everybody can listen to it. And I encourage you to share this information. I'm delighted today to introduce my guest. I just want to change the view here so that I can, okay. Um, I want to I want to welcome Michael F.K., who's here, and he's an author, speaker, coach, and host of the Chapter X podcast, where he helps high-performing men discover meaning, joy, and purpose in life as they navigate the transition from career to retirement. Observing how these men, himself included, and he talks about himself in the book too, often needed help developing their post-career identities, he founded Chapter X Community in 2020 to provide them with coaching and a supportive network. Besides his time writing, speaking, and coaching, he's returned to his first passion of music after a 50-year hiatus. He's a former CFP, CPA, financial life planner, and entrepreneur. He lives in New Jersey with his wife, Wendy, and their Beware, how do you say that? Byware.
A Buer Terrier.
Viewer terrier, Phoebe, and he loves spending time with his children and three grandchildren. Michael, I am so delighted to have you here. I have really loved your book, and what we were talking about before is I just feel like we're kindred spirits in terms of the work you do and how you approached it. And I'm actually really proud to have been a contributor to your book. So, welcome.
Thanks, Dory. This is, it's a pleasure and honor to join you and be able to share, our, parts of this journey, which, you've been a torchbearer, of this discussion for such a long time, and I'm pretty new to the game because, I spent my career as, as a financial planner, and uh, uh, so this whole discovery kind of came out of seeing that need of, helping people in a different light, beyond the money.
So tell us about that. I mean, you started in 2020, kind of focusing on men, and I'd love to hear kind of more about what that was like and what led you to writing the book now.
Okay.
Because you say in the book, it kind of was a nudgy kind of feeling along the way.
It
So,
really was. Uh, Back in 2020, as I was transitioning ownership of my firm to my younger partner, Jeremy Levin, uh, who was a great partner and brilliant young planner. Um, I started looking at what's ahead for me. And after I spent my first, 10 years of my career as an accountant, a CPA, went into financial services, financial planning, created my own firm of multi-advisors in various areas of the country. And what I kept seeing, especially as I embarked in life planning, we're really talking about those deep questions of values, those deep questions of why. What's going to motivate someone to make decisions? It has to be aligned with their values. But where I would see so often getting stuck with people say, well, I want to prepare for retirement. Well, when I would speak with couples and they would be like, okay, well, what does retirement look like for you? What are you thinking about? And, a lot of these men who would be like, well, successful business owners, attorneys, doctors, CEOs, they say, well, I don't know, I'll sit on a board, I'll play golf. It's like, okay, well, that's it. That's how you envision the rest of your life. And what I found is that men really have difficulty in thinking about and imagining a reinvention of themselves or looking at themselves in different ways because they spend their entire lives honing, in on their expertise, on what they do, and becoming better and better and better at it as they raise to their level of achievement. And then that question of who am I when I'm no longer my job? It's that how do you reimagine that? And I found for myself, and I had done a lot of thinking about what are the things I want to do when I retire? What are the things I want to do? And I have a huge list because I'm a pretty curious person of things that I wanted to explore. And I knew one thing. I knew I was kind of tired of talking about money and writing. I'd written 2 books about money. I'd done countless articles about money and spoken all over the world about planning and financial life planning and money. And I said, okay, well, I think my life is gonna revolve not around money. Um, and I made that decision to focus in on this bigger issue for many men. And it's not to say that women don't have this same issue, but by and large, generally speaking, women are so much better at the transition from career to what's next for them. And men typically, generally speaking, by and large, just come up against this wall. And for myself, um, I was very excited about this new adventure. And then I hit the wall around
Yeah.
6 months in, and I wrote about it in the book.
Yeah.
I hit the wall and I didn't know why. I didn't understand why I was in the depths of despair for no apparent reason. My health was good. I felt financially ready. I had lists of things that I was curious about. Uh, uh, Great kids and grandchildren and all these wonderful blessings. And after speaking to therapists and talking to my family and things like that, and a lot of deep thinking, I came to the understanding that I'd never mourned or grieved the loss of this block of
Mm.
time. I started working when I was 12 years old, literally, and did not stop until I retired. And it wasn't that I was very happy that, I love my clients, I love my firm, my colleagues, but I felt like, and so it wasn't mourning the loss of my career. I wasn't
Mhm.
mourning the loss of my firm that I had created, but I felt like I realized that there was this period of my life that was now over. And I
Mhm.
didn't really quite know how to deal with that or understand it. And once I had the time to understand that that's what it was, I was able to kind of work through that. Um, so I really, while I was transitioning, I took some training in 2 different programs for for life coaching, and said, how can I take what I've learned and help others? How can I help them kind of pull apart the issues that are blocking and so that they can kind of create their path through it. Um, so um, yeah, so it's just been a really
Mhm.
incredible experience. I've been blessed with people who are super supportive, people who I've become close friends, but realizing that how what our mindset is about what we do, maybe not taking ourselves quite so seriously. And I think the story of if you have time of returning to music is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Um, I was a classically trained trumpet player growing up. As a 14-year-old, I was studying with the trumpet player for the New York Philharmonics, who had two students. One was in Juilliard School of Music, and I was the other one. And he literally broke me to tears every week. And I became a good player, but it was it was uh, the blood, sweat, and tears of it. You'll excuse the pun. Uh, and I put when I was about 18 or 19, I put the horn away in the case, and I said, I'm done with music. And there's a whole story behind that, which I can share another time. But of the what got me to stop, because I was looking at a career in music. Both my parents were professional musicians. Uh, my uncle was a professional. My uncle, who was a trombonist, was the first white musician to be asked to play with Duke Ellington. Uh, and but the, I walked away from music and thought in terms of a career that would be more stable. Um, but 50 years later, and I always had the love of music. Um, but 50 years later, I was talking to a friend who was a very well-known jazz educator and musician. And he said, well, why can't you play just for fun? And I kind of like was dumbfounded. Fun? I mean, I love performing, I love playing, but it wasn't about fun. It was about achievement. And I thought about it and I said, maybe I can. And it took some work of not beating myself up and not striving and not worrying about the end result, but finding the joy. And so I started playing again and taking lessons again and playing with an adult big band and uh, just kind of reveling in the joy of music and of making music.
It's a wonderful story. And so I do have a kind of a question to bring in because I know there are a lot of women listening too. Were people aware when you hit the wall, or was it more, I mean, did you tend to just keep it inside it? Because
No, I wrote about it. I wrote about it in
back
in
then,
my blogs. Yeah, I
in
wrote
the
about
blog back then,
Yeah,
yeah.
I wrote about it and I
Yeah.
was dead honest about it. And I felt and my wife was a little hesitant when she saw what I was writing. And I said, maybe through this writing, it will help not only help me, but it will help give others permission
Yeah.
to feel comfortable to say their truth.
Truth or truth, yeah.
Yeah. And that, I didn't die from it. Right? I didn't die from the discomfort of it. And that's something I say all the time to people. It's like, no one ever died from being uncomfortable, but being in the discomfort is a really important place to be because it means that we're in the soup, we're in the change, we're in the possibility of something happening. So without that discomfort, that disruption, we're in a state of stasis. We're doing nothing. So it's like move to the discomfort, revel in the discomfort, be joyful in the discomfort, and just knowing that it's just a stage of growth.
And you talk about that so beautifully in the book. I do want to reiterate. I think the book is such a valuable contribution. I think there are some parallels with women, and I think, it's important, I think, for women who love men, or who have brothers or, sons or whatever to understand it. And your sharing in the book, I think, is permission giving of other people to deal with their own vulnerability. And, part of what I think is so lovely in the book is and I want you to be able to talk about it too, but you have these wonderful worksheets to invite people to get in touch with their inner life in a way. And, and sometimes, as you've said in the book too, sometimes it's harder for men it's a bit of a stereotype, but I think it's probably a truism, you know. So maybe share a little of some of how you invite and give permission and some of the tools, like, because I think they're wonderful.
Thank
Uh,
you. Yeah, what I tried to do was provide a, excuse me, a glide path, uh,
mhm,
or maybe it's a rocky cliff of trying to navigate, uh, going from, where you are to where you want to be in terms of shifting into a new stage of life. And so, for example, uh, one of the worksheets I ask people to do is something like, excuse me, like recalling your first day of work.
mhm,
Recall to the detail of it. And, I remember my first day of work. I remember, I had gotten this job, my first job out of college as an accountant, and I had to be there at 9 in the morning. And I was up at 5 a.m. and I was showered and dressed by 5:20. And I was, sitting there with a napkin over me, trying not to spill coffee on myself at 5:30. And I was in the parking lot at 7:30, because the office was like 15 minutes away from my house. And watching people walk in and all this anxiety of I knew nothing. And the realization that walking in and knowing nothing, I walked in with my degree, with a college degree that was gave me permission to work in that field, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know, it's like, here's the coffee cups. Oh, okay, but where's the milk or whatever? It's like you know nothing. And it's just an example of the fact that we start something, we know nothing. But think about where you were 6 months or a year later, right? In terms of your development of what you knew. And the fact is we go through in our lives these transitions from knowing from novice to mastery over and over and over and over again. And I see it as this shift into life after career is just another one. It's different, but it's just another one. We've done it before. One of the exercises I ask people to do is to talk about, their values, what they value and why. Because I think anything that if you truly value something, now you can match up your actions with the things you value. I have an exercise that deals with boundaries, creating boundaries and structures. I knew for me, there were things that were my do's and my don'ts. Okay. One of the things was not talk about money, or write about money. One was, uh, to not do anything that isn't joyful. So I had a good example. After I'd started playing with this adult big band and having a time of my life, I was contacted by a community band who wanted me to play with them. So I went to a rehearsal and I wasn't loving it. I didn't love the music they were playing. People weren't very friendly. It was eh. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's me. I'm an introvert. So maybe it was me. So I went back for another rehearsal and I felt the exact same way. And at the end of the rehearsal, I took the music folder and I handed it back to the conductor and said, sorry, this isn't for me. Because it wasn't joyful. It had nothing to do with the music. Or it had nothing to do with playing. Had to do with this just wasn't my thing. It wasn't something that gave me joy. I'm not going to do it. And coming from a lifetime where, it's show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, finish what you start. That finish what you start doesn't apply in this chapter of life in terms of what I believe. It was a beginning and an end because didn't fill the boundaries. I looked at relationships that were not working for me, that were very one-sided, and I decided I was done with those relationships. Um, and I made it very clear. So that was another one.
mhm,
Another exercise, which is probably maybe one of the hardest, is is an exercise dealing with writing a eulogy from the point of view of your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, your best friend, and what would you like to hear? What would you like to hear them say about you?
Mhm.
And, so some of these exercises are, I think, are pretty easy, and some of them are really challenging because you really have to get down to the bone. And what I assured people in the book was, no one's going to see this. This is for you. This isn't for anyone else. So don't worry. Be courageous in writing what it is that is your truth. And, I think it becomes very clear.
Mhm.
If you know what you value and you know what you wish your legacy to be, then it's a matter of aligning activities and actions. You know, is it volunteering? It's like people say, well, I don't want to work in a food bank. Well, why would you work in a food bank if that's not something you want to do? Because you think you're supposed to volunteer. You got to get rid of the shoulds, right? Of the guilt-ridden activities that this is what I should do. And if you're going to lead an authentic life, you can't do it if you're living someone else's desires. So those are some of the things that are in the book.
And they're really wonderful exercises and
Thank
just
you.
kind of pushing people out of their comfort zone. And as you say, sort of shifting, if your identity has been predominantly work, it can be terrifying. And, I know I've found that in workshops I've done with couples that often men will take me aside and say, I don't know who I am
Yeah.
if I'm not working. And you're inviting people to shift from a definition of self as just successful to what is meaning really and what are your values? And you do it beautifully. But
When we're young, we're curious creatures. As children, we're curious about everything. Our lens is wide open. Everything we see, I remember walking through the woods that were near my house growing up and turning over rocks and climbing over things and looking at everything. And it was just a vista of new information. But you could see that in life, you grow older, you career, family, and that lens starts to close around the things that are of most importance in your life. What I say is this is the time to reopen that lens, to say, what are the possibilities? And the possibilities, I won't say are endless, but they're certainly plentiful, right? The possibility, like the possibility of me playing first base for the Yankees is zero. It's okay. I've gotten over it, right? It's not a possibility. But and I'm talking to someone in Red Sox territory. I apologize for that, Dorian. Um, but the reality is that there's so many opportunities of things that we could do. I'm just finishing up a 8-week pottery workshop with on the wheel, and I've never done it before. And the young teacher who's a student in his 20s, and he's saying, "You're gonna be frustrated. It's, da 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 da." And I said, "I'm not gonna be frustrated. I have my hands on this lump of clay, and my hands are going like this is because the clay is not centered properly." And I'm like, I'm just experiencing this. I don't have I'm not an artist, but I wanted to explore what this was like. And there's no harm, no foul, right? There's nothing lost by the experience. There's just something gained saying, oh, that was interesting. Maybe I'll do it again. Maybe I won't, but I tried it. And
But that's part of the mindset that you talk about so lovely in the book. So maybe speak a little bit more about that, because if you have a mindset that I've got to be the top of the game in everything I do, then you're going to be disappointed,
you're going to live in such misery.
right?
If you were, the chief of this or the CEO of that or the owner of this or the one of the top attorneys in the state or whatever it was that you are or were, if that becomes your measure of success, you don't have a very colorful horizon going forward. So your mindset has to be that of the beginner's mind, that
Mhm.
of the learner, that of the curious. And when you see yourself defaulting back towards those very limiting beliefs of I'm an attorney, I'm a dentist, I'm a surgeon, I'm a CEO. If that's who we are, that's all we are. And how does that align with the legacy? I want to be remembered as the greatest, oral surgeon on the planet. That's what I want to be remembered as. If that's it, okay, that's your choice, but is that really in alignment with who you are? It might be what you do, but you have to keep asking that question. It's like, who am I? Beyond the occupation, the title. Yes, it gave us social connection. It gave us stimulation. It gave us financial success. It gave us recognition. It gave us uh, a sense of self. It gave us a feeling of success. But that's okay. That was great. That was wonderful. But now what? How do we find who we are? Who were we before we were that? How do we return to something simpler, something less, and I've heard so many people talk about, oh, my life and work, it was, from morning to night and people wanting and I'm always on the go and blah, 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 blah. It's like, how do I how do I find a level of peace that isn't uh dependent on me being engaged with all these big things constantly, these worries, these anxieties. There's it's someone else's turn, and that's okay. Okay, and maybe our job is to help promote that next generation and give of our experience and our knowledge and uh, our um, ourselves in a way that is to promote learning and promote thinking and growth. Um,
I think that's a wonderful response. I even the title of your book, I kind of want to go back to that for a moment because I think it's somehow relevant to what you're talking about now. It's the title is How to Craft Your Chapter X, and it's for high performing men to discover meaning, and you add joy, and you've been talking a lot about joy, which is sometimes something that people don't let themselves think about. So I love kind of the title, and so maybe explain a little of why Chapter X, and also the word craft, because you divide it in terms of exploring and refining yourself, but then the action step of crafting. So I just wanted you to maybe talk about that. And I want to encourage people who are listening live, please, you can submit questions into chat. So please, you're invited to do so. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm laughing only because I've had the question so many times. Where did Chapter X come from? And the reality is in eighth grade algebra, which I was a terrible algebra student, everything was always about solving for X, solve for X, solve for X, solve for X. And so it's always stuck with me as like, I've got to solve for X. So I probably should have solved, your chapter XY if we were going to be genetically proper. But that's where chapter X came from. Um, but the idea is when I use the term crafting, just like anything else, it's a building. It's an accumulation of knowledge that goes into the of developing something. It doesn't just come, you know, fully developed. Okay, it is done in stages. And if you've ever seen a work of art or a work of craftsmanship, you know that it's gone through stages from raw material to something that is being improved upon. And so I look at it as a building, as a putting together, as a crafting. And I and that's really where I came up with that idea. Um, the the meaning was really important, but the word joy that I was kind of I wanted to make sure it was in there because I want people to know that yes, it's different from your work, from your life in career, but it needs to be joyful because we deserve for it to be joyful. When there are people who believe, they actually believe that we were put on this earth to work and produce, and that when we no longer do this, we have no value. Okay. And when I hear that, I feel sad because that limit that puts us in a box of we are only working machines. We're only here to earn money, to achieve something, and to measure our, our success by an accumulation of wealth or achievement. And I think that we can achieve amazing things in this chapter of life and do it based on what our values are and have fun doing it. I've had people who come to me and say, I really don't know what to do. I really don't. I said, well, try something, anything. If you like it, do it again. If you don't like it, don't do it again, but do something. It doesn't matter. Okay. This idea, and this is one of the things that I think so many people get stuck on this idea that, um, in terms of their legacy in their life, it's like, if I'm not curing cancer or solving world peace, uh, you know, then it's not worthwhile. And what could be sillier than that thought, right? But that's the whole that we have to think huge. We have to think in global sense in terms of what can I do to make the world a little better, to make the people a little bit better, to make our relationships a little bit better. How can I do something that is positive in someone else's life? Um, it doesn't have to be big. It could be really super small. I do, to me, volunteering was really important, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I said, well, what can I do that can maybe help someone? And I found an opportunity where someone who has macular degeneration can't see to write out their bills. So I visit them once a week and I do that. It's not a big thing. It's a very small thing, but it provides a little bit of peace of mind for this person. So I'm actually doing it for two people now, one of which is a 99-year-old woman who knew my mother growing up, who I went to high school with her daughter. And I wound up now helping her as well. But it's like, it's a small thing. It's a couple of hours a week. It's no big deal, but it provides someone a little bit some peace of mind. That to me has value and it's joyful. So, I'm not curing cancer. I'm not discovering new planets. I'm not splitting the atom or solving world hunger, but I'm doing something small.
I always like the idea that the little P, it doesn't have to be a big P, or the same with creativity. Sometimes people cut themselves off and say, well, I'm not creative. I'm not Grandma Moses or something. So why bother? But as you said with your example with the pottery, it's okay to be a beginner if we let ourselves.
Well, I mean, just think about as beginners in everything, it was fun, right? Right? My son was making fun of me. He goes, oh, you're making an ashtray in pottery? And I'm like, no, but I'm just playing around, experiencing it. And he'll also poke fun at me, but it's like it's just something to try. And as long as I don't get hung up on, oh, I just destroyed this piece that I created while I was trimming it, and it's like, okay, I won't do that again. So I learned something. And I think that that's where the joy is. Like, okay, I learned something. So I think that's the mindset is not to beat ourselves up. When I started playing music again and I would make a mistake on what I was playing, I would, default back to, oh, I can't believe I made that mistake. And so I started putting little yellow sticky notes with smile faces on my music stand to remind me this is fun. Laugh at don't why are you taking yourself so seriously? I'm not going to be performing in Carnegie Hall anytime soon or anytime at all. So just have fun. So sometimes we just need to
Yeah.
remind ourselves that we take ourselves so seriously.
You know what that reminds me of? There's, I don't know if you, Benjamin Zander, who wrote The Art of Possibilities. He's was here in Boston, and he and his wife actually, or his ex-wife, wrote it. But he just reminded me, he would say that he would say to his students when they make a mistake, "Yes, that's good," because then you have a chance to learn from it, and so that's sort of what you're saying too. Do you find, I mean, you are open to the shift of mindset and to, and there was a hobby that, or not even a hobby, something that was so important to you that you put on the back burner and kind of have recultivated and are enjoying it now. What happens, or what, I'm sure there must be some men that just don't have that openness. I mean, how do you approach in your coaching or through the group that you have? How do you help the men that maybe tend to be more stuck because, they really think their contribution is what they were doing, not just who they are?
So, I'll ask them, okay, envision your life as it is now. Carry it forward. If you're still working, how does this end up? Is this the satisfying end that you desire? Are you leaving your office horizontal? Or if you're retired and you're not doing anything. I was talking to one guy who was telling me that his neighbor, who was he was the chief in-house attorney for a Fortune 50 company and retired. He goes, he sits on the couch and watches CNN. And I said, I'd be happy to have a conversation with him if he's interested. He goes, he won't. How's that going to work out? And I've told people, if you're stuck, is that okay? Is it okay to be stuck? It's okay to be stuck for a day, for a week. Maybe it's okay to be stuck for a month. But is it okay to be stuck for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, for 10 years? How does that work out? What does it look like? You paint the picture for me. Where's the joy in your life? Where's the meaning in your life? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you care about? Who do you care about? Start with that very human sense of,
Mhm.
what do you lose by ... right?
Great, thanks. I want to integrate some of the questions that are coming up in chat, and I mean, I have my whole slew of them too. But uh, Julia asks, what do you find the biggest challenges for couples where there's a high-performing spouse entering retirement?
Ooh, I think one of the biggest challenges is the ability to ability to communicate real feelings about the fears and the doubts of what comes next. I think those are huge, huge issues. Also, for couples who are used to not spending a lot of time, this constant time together, how that's going to work. Okay, what are the expectations? What are the concerns? Is being able to really talk about these things. And I recommend is like take the time to create small meetings to discuss small topics that kind of bring the conversation towards some solutions rather than expect that you're going to sit down and hammer it all out and boom, boom, boom. Okay, this is the way it's going to work, blah, 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 and that's it. Because it doesn't work that way. Um, People need to absorb and to think and to kind of sit with these thoughts and then come back and have another conversation. But I like to make them small, make them very specific. I'm not you. I had a client years ago who all they wanted to do was retire and they couldn't financially because he had a second family and weddings and college and all this other stuff. Um, and I said, well, why is it that you want to retire so badly? And he was an attorney. He said, I'm just so tired of the commute and the blah blah blah. I said, well, your name is on the door. I said, can't you maybe work from home every now and then and give yourself a shot? And he said, yeah, I could. And he says, I'll try that and see if it works. And 6 months later, he came back to the, he goes, I'm never going to retire. I love it. I sit on the deck and I have my laptop and life is great. And his wife says, if he's home one more day a week, I'm going to kill him and then you. Because they really didn't talk about it. He just thrust himself here and
Yeah.
so and expected that his being there, how that would he didn't think about how that was going to affect her life. So they didn't have that conversation.
So, within that vein, what are suggestions? Since, as I said before, there are a lot of women on this call in addition to men. What are suggestions you have of how women can be supportive and help open the conversations and not necessarily be enabling? I mean, kind of the
Yeah, I think there's it's a lot of asking questions, and without necessarily the need for a specific answer. Like this is what I was thinking about. Any thoughts on this? Rather than make it confrontational, especially when a guy who's been, working at it for decades, top of his field, high charging, high achieving, and, he had all the answers in the world for his life there. He doesn't know what this life is. He doesn't know what this is. So it's all got to be experimented. And like I think having those kind of conversations that are just kind of questions like, what kind of things have you been thinking about? What possibilities? What are the things that might be fun or might be interesting for you? So asking questions and being and just taking it in and kind of leading towards those deeper conversations because I think that those are down the road a piece. And I think
great.
also getting professional help
Mhm.
is also really important. There's a difference between, wearing a coaching hat and being a therapist. And, I'm not a therapist and I don't therapize people. So I like to ask questions.
Great. So Pamela asks, she says, or says, and has a question. I offer workshops for new retirees and find men resent the idea that they might need some help retiring. Their partners and children often push the idea, but no dice. How can I offer resources and ideas in a way men will feel more comfortable participating? And she also comments, I think I'm at a disadvantage as a female presenter, probably. Comments?
I think that's true. I think that's true by and large. Um, I think just like years ago when I wanted to do more speaking around money and I wanted to speak to women, it was kind of a closed door situation because women didn't want to be, mansplained about money uh, by men, and which I understand. Uh, and I think the same thing might be true on this area. Um, I think it's challenging to because you're being called to task, okay, in an area that you have no expertise. And so I think some of the resources that are out there, I mean, there are a lot of coaches out there that work specifically with men. There are podcasts, there are so many good resources out there. You know, I host a monthly Zoom meeting for the men in Chapter X to come on, and we just talk. And they talk about their issues. I have three rules. We don't talk sports, we don't talk politics, and I don't care what they're drinking. So it's like we just talk about real stuff, and and it's a safe space because there are no women there. No one has to, and you don't have to participate. You're not going to be called on. You can just sit and listen, or you can share. So these are some of the things that I've tried to offer. I write 2 or 3 blog pieces a week where I offer my thoughts and observations. Um, and maybe it's a place that you can point people to come on and listen to the podcast or listen to or read some of the sign up for the blog pieces. There's no cost or obligation. They're not going to be sold anything or,
Mhm.
promoted. So it might be a resource.
So why don't you, this is a perfect segue into telling people how they could refer people or how people could join Chapter X and how to access the podcast. Why don't you share that now?
Sure. You can find it all on michaelfk.com. And they can sign up for the pod for the well they can sign up to get the notifications for podcasts or get the blogs or the meeting announcements. Um, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple or any of the places where podcasts are, and it's just Chapter X with Michael K. And yeah, it couldn't be simpler. No one's tracking anyone. No one's, it's like you want to come in, you're welcome. You want to read my stuff, you're welcome. It's just
Great.
this is one of my ways of giving back.
That's great. I just typed it into the chat so people will just have, I forgot to put the www, but
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
knows that part.
There's a pop-up for signups, I think,
Oh,
somewhere.
okay, great. So Sheila asks, when working with men who have had significant positions involving well-honed skills, I found more than once that when they decide to volunteer in an area that interests them, the organization where they volunteered completely underutilized their skills and potential use. We as coaches can't call the organizations and make suggestions. Any ideas on this?
There are so many organizations out there. It's just a matter of looking for the right ones that match up skills. It's like this is what I'm interested in doing. I met with this guy several months ago who was I was introduced to, and he's involved on a theater board. He's a chairman of a nonprofit theater board, and he kind of like, maybe you'd like to get involved? And I said, it sounds really interesting, but it's not my thing. Um, but there are people who, this is what I'm looking for. Tell me what are the skill sets that I have, or these are the skill sets I have. Who might use these skills? So it's really a matter of going out there, networking, asking those questions. What are the organizations that you might be interested in, and saying, these are my skill sets. This is how I'd like to, what I'd like to bring to the table. Do you have an opportunity? So, I think that's probably the best way to do it.
That segues, I think, into if you would be willing to share a little of the tools you have in that exploring part, the first part of the book, you mentioned the tools that people don't often recognize that they really are really important skills. They're tools, but skills, problem solving. I mean, you mentioned like a whole bunch of them and then, others. So maybe mention those because I think it may be helpful for people to be aware of that. And I also really encourage that people purchase your book, How to Craft Your Chapter X. I must say that, as a coach and working with men, women, and couples, I've already begun. I just even gave a talk last week and I recommended it because I think it's just really helpful and with the worksheets and all of that. But talk about, if you would, because people don't always think about the things you mentioned, that there really are tools and they're things that we have or that people have developed. Uh,
Sure. So things like, as you said, problem solving. Throughout our life, we are problem solving. And so why is it different when we're no longer working? We are problem solving. And so we've got these skills that we've built up over decades and decades of our lives of figuring out how to solve a problem. Um, Learning, we're lifelong learners. We're always learning something new. We're always learning and building on our knowledge. And that needs to be continued throughout our life. That doesn't stop when we start working. I mean, it doesn't stop when we stop working. Being flexible, you know, we have to be flexible throughout we're always thinking, okay, this doesn't work, we're going to try something else. So flexibility is a tool that we have honed over our lifetime. resilience. How many times do we get knocked down and we have to get up again? And it's that resilience muscle that we have to continually use and exercise to say, that was maybe that was a disappointment, but it's not the end of the world. It's just the next step to next. Creativity. Creativity, we are, even people who say, oh, I'm not creative. We are creative in one way or another, whether we are creating artwork, we're creating music, we're creating words on a page, we're creating thoughts and ideas, we are creating. Um, Communicating with others, right? We've learned over our lifetime how to ask questions, how to make a point, how to share information. So communications is one of the tools that we need to continue to use. And understanding purposeful action, the why. Why am I getting out of bed in the morning? We know that while we're working, right? We need we know what our purposeful action is. But when our work career is over, we still need purposeful action. We need a purpose. And the purpose needs to be something that we devise as meaningful to us. So those are some of the tools that we hone during our lifetime, and during our work career and our lifetime. And then there's things like groundedness. Okay, what's the reality of our situation? If you have limitations, if you have, um, it's like it's that idea. I'm never going to be play first base for the New York Yankees. As much as it's in my head that, gee, I would love to play first base for the New York Yankees, let's be grounded in reality. What is my financial situation? What is my health like? What are the things that my situation? What's working? What's not working? Having a growth mindset, that mindset piece is so important, because a fixed mindset that keeps us stuck in this is the only way it can be is it's a death sentence is the only way I can put it. Uh, because it means that we're never going to change. It means we're never going to look at things differently. We're never going to get beyond this belief that where we're comfortable and understanding that living in that comfort zone is really not the place that we need to be. The minute we feel that we are stuck in that sameness, that comfort of our existence, that's not offering any chances for development, change, shift, improvement, learning. We're going on the opposite direction. Um, we also need things like a sense of humor, right? We need to be able to laugh at ourselves and laugh at the world, and that not taking things all that seriously. Um, and we need to think in terms of how we help others, how the purpose of our life is more than ourselves. Um, so it's like, what do you value? I mean, I was lucky enough to have over this past. Well, I have my two of my three granddaughters live locally, and I have them with me a lot, and it's absolutely precious time to me, and it's like I'm in complete gratitude for having that privilege of having those girls around me. I feel sad that the third one's not with me, but again, it's feeling that levels of gratitude and of what you have and what I can give to them in terms of love and attention. So,
Well, and you really talk in the book too, and I totally agree. We live our legacy every day, as well as thinking about, the kind of the non-fin. I mean, there's the financial piece of legacy, but the importance of that non-financial piece that you're talking about too. Uh,
yeah, it is, what do we leave behind? Uh,
mhm,
I remember one of my first podcast guests was a friend and author. He's a professor of finance at Santa Clara University, Mayor Statman, who he was actually born in a displaced persons camp post
mm,
World War II.
mm,
And the theme of our conversation was there are no pockets in the shroud.
mm,
We don't take it with we don't take our wealth with us. So how do we use our resources to help others, both financially and non-financially? And I think that deserves a really big space in our
mm.
in our hearts and in our lives as we live, because we don't know how long our runway is. We know the one thing we do know is that where we are today, our runway is a lot shorter than it was when we were 20. So if we are not mindful of that we don't know how long we have, how can we afford to waste it? How can we afford to be mired in nonsense, in sitting there watching CNN or looking at the news as if it tells us anything important, but it's what's really inside of us and what do we have a drive to do? What do we need? What do we want? What's important to us? What allows us to put our head on the pillow at night and feel like I'm living my values?
That's excellent. I think you responded to there's another question that Pradeep had asked, which is, Michael, how can we encourage our clients to shift their mindset from career business ownership to crafting their Chapter X? Um, are there other kind of thoughts in that? I mean, I think shifting them and getting them to, to read your book and to join your group, as but other kind of thoughts.
I just think inviting people to imagine other possibilities that go beyond getting up and going to work every day, and how, I've heard people say so often, I don't know how I'll fill my day. And then I hear people say who are retired, I don't know how I ever worked. I've got so many things to do. It's after they retire, and it's really a matter of how you can't imagine it until you do it. You've got to walk on the hot coals to
Mhm.
experience what it feels like to go
Mhm.
into this next chapter and know that there is disruption, there is discomfort, there is fear, there is all these other emotions that go into it. Because it also, the end of career also signifies for a lot of men the end of life. So we've got to go through this emotional pain and this emotional upheaval, and recognize that also, our bodies are not as healthy now as typically as they were, when we were younger, and that we're facing other challenges. So this end of career signifies another signal of towards end of life. So it's like, what do you want to be, as my granddaughter, the sprinkles on top of the ice cream cone? What do you want to be the sprinkles on top of your ice cream cone?
Mhm. That's a beautiful way to think about it. The other thing that Michael does in his book that I just want to mention, and I know, people have been commenting they're going to buy the book, and is you bring in some other experts that, kind of, so a few, there was it Dr. Bernstein, I think, or some
Right.
really good ones about health and also little vignettes of different people talking about it. But do you want to
Yeah,
comment a little on,
Yeah, I
yeah.
had I had Dr. David Bernstein, who is a part of the Chapter X community, is a retired gerontologist. I had Philip Pape, who is a exercise specialist who works with older people in terms of functional movement and things like that. I had oh my God, he's gonna kill me. Um, I had a psychologist to talk about. Uh, the ideas behind or the challenges of retirement. And then I had you, Dori, who contributed. It was Dr. Glenn Berger, who was the therapist, and I had you who talked about retirement and the impacts on your partner and your family. And uh, I didn't feel qualified to write that chapter, and asking you to contribute it, because it's certainly not my expertise at all. And one that I couldn't think of a better way of kind of capstoning the book. So I wanted to make sure that I had other voices in the book. And plus, I asked men in the Chapter X community to contribute their thoughts about different aspects of retirement. And they contributed, and we stuck it in various places in the book to kind of give a different flavor of so it's like, I don't know if I want to hear if I want to hear me talking constantly. So we wanted other voices in the book as well.
And it really adds richness to the book of having those vignettes as well as your stories and all too. And so, we're nearing the end. I don't at the moment have any other questions. I just have comments that people just are finding this so valuable, Michael, and looking forward to reading the book and um, let's see.
Anyone wants,
Um,
LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, they can find me and
okay.
have a conversation or email me. It's mk@michaelfk.com. Happy to have a conversation anytime. Yeah, real simple.
I just want to read Sheila here says, fantastic program. Have a strong suspicion that Michael's prior non-followed career in music and his followed career had much to do with the enormous value he offers getting retirees to employ both creative thought and daring. Just do it. Book bought. Thank you. So as we wind up, what are some, this has just been a joy to have you here, but as we wind up, what are some just final takeaways that you'd like to share with the men and the women who are, on the call?
Mhm. Thanks, Dori. And I just, I just wish for everyone to hold on to the idea that, listen, as humans, as we're all fighting and we're all struggling to live the best lives we can. And, you know, I've used the expression, you need to hold on to your sense of humor. Um, you know, I've been accused many times of being a little too hard on myself. And so I was going to try and offer a special deal when you buy my book of buying a ladder that comes with it so you can climb down off your own back. Um, but, the idea is that, we are really tough on ourselves and we need to be a little bit more gentle and we need to be a little bit more willing to have a little fun with this and play with it.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope that those of you who are listening, either live or listening when it becomes a podcast, will purchase this book. It's really a valuable, valuable contribution. And Michael, you're such a lovely, wonderful person who I think, through the course of your life, both the financial planning and working with men and women and couples, and now really using your voice as a man to reach other men, to help them create a really lovely, meaningful chapter X. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Dory. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.